Hi everyone and welcome back to Star Trek Online. This is Boomer and I felt like I would take you through a bit of an update to the Sathanas. I did mention in my sort of channel update video that I had done quite a lot of work on the Sathanas, so I thought that it would be helpful to go through a few things. I also mentioned that I thought that the ship could do about 10k DPS. Now, it turns out I was a little wrong on that, but we'll see that in the second part of this video. So what I'm going to do, pretty much my skills are the same as they were in the original video that I did. What I would recommend is that you watch that if you want to get an overview of the actual build. I've changed a couple of things. I think I have transfer shield strength instead of polarized hull, and I have emergency power to shields in there as well instead of probably engineering team. But the biggest change are these two guys in terms of my bridge officers, and they are Romulans. Now what they have is this superior Romulan operative ability, which is 2% crit chance and 5% critical severity, and I have two of them and they do stack. So they're available from the Romulan embassy when you have a fleet. I think it's level 2 embassy. And you'll see what they do to the Sathanas overall. At the moment, you just have a look at the stats of it. 53,500 hull, round about 9,000 shields on each arc, and decent enough resistances. So we're all not too bad. But this is where things have changed. You'll notice that that crit chance is up near 20%. And the reason I built it this way is just so that I could take advantage of the fact that anti-proton beams have a bonus to crit severity when they crit. I want to crit as much as possible there and do as much damage. The bonus as well coming from it is that I have 25% bonus accuracy, which also produces accuracy overflow, which means that you end up doing more critical damage. I'm still on the advanced fleet proton beams. I haven't yet upgraded them to elite. It's expensive to upgrade all of those weapons, and to be honest, I had more pressing things to do with the cash I had available. First thing, gravimetric photon torpedo. It's from the Dyson Sphere reputation. This thing is incredible. I'm not sure whether it's this weapon or it's the actual set that's better on this one, but this replaced the wide-angle quantum torpedo launcher, and I've never looked at going back to it, even though the quantum torpedo launcher can do more damage. A simulated deflector array, same as the first video. I've replaced my warp core here with one that has weapon to auxiliary transfer. I will swap it out probably for a Dyson Sphere warp core with AMS at some point. But at the moment I just wanted weapon to auxiliary because I'm running a auxiliary to battery build, so therefore I want as much auxiliary power as possible. You will actually see my weapon, shield and engine energies actually go up to 125 each during a combat situation. I have an advanced fleet resilient shield. I do have a Mako 12 shield, but the problem is that the Mako shield doesn't work with one of my consoles, so therefore I have been forced to sort of leave it behind. The engineering consoles are where things change. First off, I've got an all-res RCS accelerator. I think that's Dyson Sphere as well. It could be dilithium mine, actually. I think that's dilithium mine. Gives me 11% near as makes no difference res all, and it gives me a big flight turn rate boost, which when you're flying a cruiser does make a pretty big difference. It lets you actually control your ship a lot better. This console, the proton particle stabilizer, looks terrible, but the reason it's on the ship is pretty much for the two set for the Dyson Sphere, which is I get 23% photon projectile weapon damage, which includes the gravimetric torpedo, which takes it up to quantum torpedo damage, and also an overall 3% crit chance, which is better than any of my other consoles. The 3-part does give a huge amount of critical damage to photon weapons, but unless you're building a photon torpedo beam, photon torpedo boat, which is certainly a potential build, especially if you're a shield stripping science vessel, I decided to stay away from that for the moment and just go for the crit. This is probably the biggest must-have in terms of a beam boat in this game, the Plasmonic Leech. It's available from the Romulan lockbox. It's also available on the exchange for about 15 to 17 million energy credits, depending on how lucky you are. And I also have the Tetraburnium hull armor that I had first time round. I could replace it with a Neutronium, which has res all on it, but at the moment most of the enemies in the game that I'm facing in PvE are doing plasma or anti-proton damage, so just having a big buff on those damage resistance is probably, I don't know if it outweighs a Neutronium. I'll probably get a Neutronium at some point, but at the moment there's not really much reasoning behind changing that. They'd be changing it for the sake of it. Assimilated module, you guys know this, it's on pretty much every build. Crit chance increase, crit severity increase, and it's a 2 set with the I think it's with the bug cutting beam. Either way, yeah, it's with the cutting beam, and it gives you a 2.5% chance to have the Omega weapon amplifier, which gives you more weapon power, huge weapon power resistance, and huge maximum weapon power resistance. This build is very much about keeping your power levels really high, which means that you do as much damage as possible. Your shields regenerate really quickly, and you move pretty quickly as well. If your engines are at 125, you can actually move while in a tractor beam. And the Tachyokinetic Converter is probably the weakest of all my consoles. I do have several other things I could potentially use. I have the Nukara console, which gives you 10% beam accuracy, and a couple of other things I can try in there for sure. I might just put a flow capacitor console in there, to tell you the truth, at some point. And finally, again from the Dyson Sphere, can you see a pattern here? These are the Vulnerability Locator Tactical Consoles, Mark 12. This one obviously has plus AP on it. So they do more damage than a normal anti-proton Mark 12 console, and you get crit chance with it as well, which is why the Sathanas has such a huge crit chance, basically. I know people who have more than 20%, but 20% is pretty much around where I want to be in a PvE anti-proton build. So that's pretty much that. The one thing to bring up, first off, is duty officers. Now, again, I've spent some money, or some fleet credits, and I now have 6 spaces on my duty officer roster as opposed to 5. That's something you can buy again from the Dyson Sphere. I think you need to be tier 3 rep to get the 3rd space one. As you can see, I have the Con Officer, which reduces recharge time to attack pattern beta, and we'll see the effects of that in a second. Just give me a second here, and I will. Yep, let's just activate attack pattern beta. You can see it's on a 2-minute cooldown. That goes all the way down to 1 minute, and then obviously I am in an auxiliary to battery build, so we hit that, and it takes another 30% off it, so we're down to a 20% 20-second cooldown. And I should be able to hit my other auxiliary to battery round about now, and there you go, attack pattern beta is now off cooldown. So that kind of shows you how fast this ship can regenerate its attack pattern beta. So it means it's almost constantly up, which means that your opponents are getting very, very serious resistance debuffs. The other things I have on here, I have 2 emergency power slots in emergency power to weapons and shields. So I have a damage control engineer who has a pretty big chance to reduce the recharge time on these. So again, keeping emergency power to weapons and shields pretty much always up, trying to keep my damage as high as possible. And I have a warp core engineer, which means whenever I use a emergency power to weapon or shields, I have a big chance to give plus 25 to all my power systems. So again, trying to keep power systems as high as possible. And finally, the 3 technicians, which are an absolute must as far as this build goes. They stack on top of each other and give 30% in total, reducing to all bridge officer abilities. When I use emergency power to auxiliary to emergency battery. So that's pretty much the build, but I'm guessing that you guys will probably want to see this in action. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention as well. As you can see, I'm holding the mouse way away from the keyboard. I have finally decided to go macros. Basically, what I've done is I've just used a really simple macro, which is bound to the spacebar key. It fires all weapons. It then executes the entirety of tray 7, which you can see I've got tray 1 and 2 on the screen, but I've also like made a tray 7, and that will execute in order, and then it will equalize my shields. So basically it's a very standard sort of mash spacebar and you will be fine build. So, a couple of things. Oh, I did notice I summoned 3 Photonic Typhoon battleships there, my bad. Anyway, final thing to go over is where I am with the reputation arc at this point. Dyson joint venture, I am about 7k reputation off tier 5, so that should be done in a couple of days or so. New Romulus, I've been at tier 5 for ages, but there's just nothing that I want there. So I'm afraid it's pretty much stuck at that point. New Kara Strike Force, I have literally just hit tier 5 before I started recording this video. I don't really have anything that I want to build from here. I've heard a couple of things about the hyper-refracting Tetrion beam bank and a couple of other things, but really I don't see how Tetrion can outstrip anti-proton in this sort of build. I can see builds where it might work, again, shield stripping builds, things like that, but in terms of what I want to be doing with my ship, Tetrion weaponry just isn't really that good. And Borg, I've been tier 5 for ages. I am crafting the ground weapons at this point because I do actually have a confession to make in that I kind of like the ground Dyson Sphere missions. I will be showing those off in a later video, and I am crafting an awful lot of their I am crafting quite a lot of the battle sets just so that I can have pretty much my choice of whatever I want, be it Mako 12, Dyson 12, or the Jem'Hadar 12 set that I actually have at the moment that I upgraded through the low-buy store. One thing I will be showing off at some point to some of the other ships I have a Tal Shiar adapted destroyer. I also unlocked the Dyson Science Destroyer during the most recent event, so there's a couple of things that I can show off there. The Sathanas is still going to be my primary ship until I decide to replace it with a probably with a fleet, either a fleet Avenger or a fleet Sovereign, pretty much. One thing I did change on my status was this one here, Precision over Enhanced Shield Systems. I made a big mistake there, so I re-rolled my reputation powers on that so I could get the extra 3% crit. Can you sense a pattern going on here? Basically, if you are playing PvE, you want to just pretty much do as much damage as you possibly can, and that's going to be the that's going to be the sort of the ground rules for you playing PvE. PvP, things change quite a bit. Oh, I've just noticed I haven't chosen my tier 5 rep thing here. Well, the only thing I can choose is the refracting Tetrion Cascade, so I suppose I'll be choosing that then. I think it's just a sort of a shot from the deflector, and it rebounds onto various things. It's basically like chain lightning firing from your weapon systems, but you know, I might use that in the future. I'll probably forget. The problem is I can't add it to my row 7 because it is full, so I'm going to have to remember to keep that to manually keep that up. I'll show you row 7 while I'm here. Here we go. As you can see, there's row 7. Basically triggering in that order goes emergency power, photonic fleet sensor scan, directed energy modulation tactical team, attack pattern beta, beam array fire at will, torpedo spread, auxiliary power to emergency to auxiliary to emergency, so everything goes back on cooldown, and then it just goes from left to right again. And I'm going to have to manually click on the Tetrion Cascade, but whatever. It seems to do some quite decent damage. We'll see how that works in a future video, I suppose, because unfortunately the next part of this video I recorded before I recorded this. You know, sort of sorry, I apparently am capable of time travel when I'm doing my YouTube videos. So basically, yeah, just going through all the options that I have here, and I've pretty much taken the offensive ones on every single opportunity. I possibly can. But that's just one thing I will be doing. I will do some ground missions for you because I do quite like, certainly the Dyson Sphere one. I think they did a really good job with that. Alright, it's a little bit ridiculous, but it's still, you know, at the end of the day, the point of a game is to have fun, and that's really what I wanted to be doing. But anyway, here, I suppose you want to see her in action, so let's do that, shall we? I am in Infected Conduit. And the one thing you will see on the top left, that is actually a DPS parser. It's Combat Log Reader. And let's see how I get on. This is also going to be a little bit of a lesson in why DPS isn't everything. The basic job that I'm looking to do with my ship is to just broadside everything as much as possible. You can see my DPS figure is already way above what I thought it would be, but that's going to be quite natural at the beginning because you're going to pop all of your, you know, just by the whole mashing spacebar thing, you are going to, you know, you're going to hit the hardest you can at the beginning of an STF. So even though you get a pretty big damage spike, just be aware that it will probably drop over the course of an STF. Certainly if you have to run cover. But this is the reason here why I am not, you know, DPS isn't everything. There you can see the gravimetric torpedo creating a black hole, and that makes, you know, that really can cause a little bit more, you know, that causes just that little bit more damage. But I don't have a projectile weapon officer or anything like that. I am just literally firing the gravimetric torpedo as I get a chance to. One of the things that I did notice was that because I'm on a faster computer, that I can control the ship a heck of a lot better, and that means that I'm bringing up torpedoes and broadsides a lot easier. Now we have a problem here in that the guy who's guarding the gate, you can see him there, isn't actually paying any attention whatsoever to the nanite ships. So therefore, and I've also miscontrolled my ship quite badly there. So that nanite sphere is actually going to get quite close. And this is why DPS isn't everything. In an STF you actually want coordination, because I'm afraid that even with the DPS that I'm chucking out here, which is still well over 10k, the other members of the fleet aren't doing that. And unfortunately my weapons all got caught on cooldown there at exactly the same time, and the sphere managed to start healing the nanite transformer. So I'm afraid we've failed the optional here, and that kind of shows why, you know, communication and participation in an STF and knowing what you're doing is sort of way beyond, you know, is way beyond, well, I don't know about way beyond DPS, but you can see here I'm actually doing more damage than the rest of the party put together. So the logical thing for us to actually have done at that point would be, I mean, I guess that the other guys don't have tractor beam, don't have Mako things. What you ideally want on Infected, certainly on Elite, is to have at least one guy who has tractor beam repulsor, and what he's able to do at that point is that he can knock the nanite spheres and nanite probes back, while the heavy DPSs can just knock things down, knock down the generators incredibly quickly, and then it doesn't really matter. The rest of the raid just then mops up the nanite spheres as they go, because they're really just not a threat. So yeah, I think that the way that my DPS is looking at the moment, I probably should start running elites now. I was always a little bit hesitant to run elites, because first off, my DPS when I did the first Sathanas video was something around 4.5. When I was playing on my laptop with this pretty much exact build, I was only getting sort of 8.5. But the reasoning behind that has become pretty clear at this point. I was just completely unable, because of the lack of FPS I had, I was just completely unable to actually control my ship to any decent degree, and therefore I and therefore I was missing broadsides, missing torpedo shots, all that sort of stuff. Also, I was missing commands on, you know, ship. I was missing commands on the taskbar and things like that. So all these little things were adding up to make quite a big difference. So as you can see, I was a little bit wrong when I said that I was on 10k DPS. I'm actually closer to 13.5, I think, somewhere around there. So yeah, that's for a science captain. That's pretty severe in terms of DPS. In a cruiser, anyway, it's pretty good. And the ship isn't complete yet by any stretch of the imagination. I think I have a couple of things to go that could improve what I was doing, but this I think is a pretty this is a pretty decent build, even though it has taken a long time to put together. Also, a fleet ship will obviously do more damage because it will have that 4th tactical console, so it will just do more damage as a it will just do more damage on the whole. So my DPS is dropping a little bit here because I'm taking on one monolithic target, and that's always going to happen. So I'm going to start shooting up the tactical cube as well, just because I can. So there goes the gateway, and now I'm going to literally just pop absolutely everything. I'm going to even use my Nucara strike force. At one point I was actually contemplating, before this, there we go, photonic ships, that increases it. At one point I was actually considering buying some, or crafting. You actually have to craft them in the Romulan reputation system. I was planning on crafting some summon warbird things just so I could do even more, but I think that that's probably going a little bit overkill. I'm just going pet-tastic. Well, I'm in a tractor beam here, and well, it looks like the tractor beam ended up going off. I was about to trigger evasive maneuvers again, but it seems like there's no point. Everyone seems to be healing me, which is a nice thing for them to do. Thank you very much, guys. But yeah, the cube's going down pretty hard here, and I think I'm going to end up with that. Yep, and there we go, 13,420 for those of you who are interested in DPS. But as you can see, we did actually miss the objective there. So I would still say that, you know, what you're always going to end up with things like that when you do pugs. But one thing that but if you do get a good team for this, you can easily you can easily hit the objective. You just have someone who's decent covering the gate. Now this is the parser that I was using. As I said, combat log reader, breaks down how your damage is done. And one thing that did fix this quite a lot is that for a while, certainly at the beginning of this year, beam array fire at will couldn't crit, and obviously that just completely screwed my entire build, because I was, I couldn't crit with the thing that does the most damage. But as you can see, I'm doing crit more. I've got bonus crit there over what my ship's telling me, and the photon torpedoes are actually critting for 10% above that, which is, is pretty huge. Especially considering they do quantum torpedo levels of damage anyway now. Ended up doing over 5 million damage in that STF. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that one went. Aside the fact that we didn't get the, we didn't get the objective. Funny thing there, the max one hit there is actually coming from my Nimbus Pirate distress call rather than me. So as you can see, this build is really about just keeping up damage rather than doing it in huge bursts. Tactical captains tend to do a lot more burst damage, and PvP is about burst as well. Anyway guys, that is going to be it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed the update, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.